All right, I'm showing that the time is 11 a.m. Central Time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Ben Wilson. I'll be giving today's presentation. This is going to be a site to do business for advanced users. And so the idea behind today's session is that our users have, a fair amount of acumen from either a technology standpoint or using site to do business, but really want to show you a little bit more about some of the capabilities that we don't think that everyone either knows about or has a clear understanding on. And so that's really what our focus is going to be on today. I did want you to know that today's session is being recorded. If you want to pass this on to someone else, or if you want to revisit anything that we are going through today, if you go to stdb.com and click on the Learning Center and into the webinars, you'll find all of our previously created content is available. So maybe today's session is a little quick. Maybe there's some things that I don't cover that you'd like to revisit. You might be interested in revisiting some of our previous content like STDB for intermediate users or STDB for beginner users. I'm also going to use some content from Moody CRE Market Pro. We did a session with Shane Hayes a couple of weeks ago on April 9th and also have that archived and available here. Also, I want to provide my contact information. If you ever need to get in touch with me, my contact information is bwilson@ccm.com, or feel free to give me a call. I'd be happy to help however I can. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. If you have questions throughout today's presentation, if you could just ask those in the question and answer box. I might not get to those immediately, but I will certainly do my best to get to those by the conclusion of the presentation. And again, want to thank you all for joining today. Excited for today's session. So most of what we do today is going to be in the business analyst application. And so I'm going to go ahead and start there. And I want to talk about, to start, and I get asked this question quite a bit. Let's say you're working in shopping center development, or maybe you're a leasing agent and doing some work in an area, and you're trying to get a feel for what businesses like to tenant around each other. So the whole idea is co-tenancy. And I want to start off by looking at the Houston MSA as my market area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define my area. And I'm going to select my geography, and I'm just going to select Houston. I'm going to select the whole CBSA. So CBSA and MSA are the same things. And what we're interested in looking at right now is going to be the Sprouts Farmers Market. And so we're going to create maps and go into our points of interest search. And under my current map extent, I'm going to adjust that to where I'm looking only at Houston, Pasadena, Woodlands. And I want to look at Sprouts Farmers Market. And what we're going to find is there's 8 Sprouts locations in the Houston MSA. And so right now you'll notice that there's a little bit of clustering going on. There's 3 of them kind of down in the Sugar Land area, a couple out west, and then 3 of them in northwest Houston. And instead of viewing that way, I'm going to go into my legend and I am going to uncluster those points. So if I scroll down over here on the left side, you see the legend. If I click on, if I click on the legend and on the points, I can uncluster those points. And so right now we see a red dot for each of those different locations. Well, and just one other item kind of before we jump into the actual co-tenancy, we also have the ability to adjust the symbology here. And so if you click on that red dot, you'll notice the ability to import your own custom symbol. Once you've got that imported, so like a Sprouts logo, for example, those will be saved permanently under your custom logo database. And so you can see here that I've got a lot of different logos that I can use. And if I was to look at Sprouts, you could see that that is available here. We got a number of different Sprouts logos, and I could upload Sprouts logos. I could also do HEB or any other business, Whole Foods, and I could have those mapped and then captured with a simple create PDF or image. So we do have a lot of users that take advantage of that capability. Just wanted people to be aware of that. But the next thing I want to do is we've got these 8 different Sprouts locations, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the select key. So up in the top right-hand corner on that toolbar, the third button down is going to be the select key. It's an arrow. I'm going to click shift and create a rectangle around the area of importance. And what you see here is that I have 1 of 8. And so what this allows me to do is create buffers from my study areas. And what I want to do is I'm going to create a 0.25-mile ring around these 8 different sites. And so it's going to take just a moment. And the reason that I'm creating such a small analysis area is because I want to know who is across the street, who is right next door. And what we're going to find is when we go in and do a points of interest search, we can do a points of interest search from the combined study area of those 8 locations. So for example, if you wanted to know all of the business right next to Sprouts in the Houston market, what we can do is we can go in here and select this create site for combined areas. And now you see that I have 8 polygons, kind of the name of my study area is 8 polygons. My study area is actually only 1.57 square miles, but these are the businesses that are right next to Sprouts. And so next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go into create maps and do another points of interest search, only this time, instead of looking in my Houston market, I'm going to change that to my sites and look at my 8 polygons. So again, my 1.57 square miles. And I'm not looking for Sprouts this time. I want all businesses. So under my search, you can see here that I've got options for different business list providers. But in this case, I'm going to select all points. So I'm going to add all those points. And you can see here that there are 908 businesses that are within the 0.25 miles of all of these different locations. You can see, some really tenant-rich areas from those pinpoints. Now, what I really like about this kind of workflow is if I go into show filters and go to company business name, I can see the frequency that businesses appear. So for example, if I wanted to know what kind of businesses like to be around Sprouts, I could say, oh, wow, there's 28 ATMs. Of course, there's 8 Sprouts farmers markets, 7 Blue Rhinos. I believe those are the propane exchange. Umi Sushi, those are actually typically located in a Sprouts. But also, you're going to see some businesses like Five Below, Amazon Lockers, H&R Blocks, Jersey Mike's, Starbucks, Mattress Firms. All of those are occurring at 3 or more times within the area. Burger King's, Charlie's, Chipotle, Cinnabon, CVS, Exxon. GameStop. And so it's just a tool that allows you to get a better understanding of what kind of businesses like to locate around each other. So if that's something that you might be able to use in your business. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear my map. And I got asked this question the other day, and I realized that we hadn't really talked a whole lot about it, but this is typically something that my appraisers are interested in doing, and it's just the idea of creating a simple subject comp map. But it's something that we don't talk a whole lot about, so I want to make sure that people realize that that is definitely something that you can do here. And in order to do this, I'm going to minimize my business analyst screen for a moment. I'm just going to show you the actual Excel file that I'm going to bring in. Here you can see that I have a Florida subject comp map. It is very simple and straightforward. I got subject property, and then I have 6 comps. And these are all located in Florida. I have some additional data here for sales, but I'm actually not going to use it here. I just want to bring in my subject and comp data. So I'm going to take that Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to go in here and I'm going to add data and import the file. I'm going to browse and choose my file, Florida subject comp map. I'm going to import it. And I have the point locations here. In a moment, I'm going to show you how to do geographic boundaries, but because we have the addresses of these locations, I'm going to select point locations. I know that it has address, city, state, and zip code, so I'm just going to click next. And you can see here that there's 4 sites in the Orlando metro area and a couple in the Tampa area. And right now the points are clustered. So I want one individual point for each of the different sites. And then the next thing I'm going to do is right here under the location single symbol. If I change this from location single symbol, if I toggle down to unique symbols, what we're going to find is if I click more options, you're going to see that I have my comp properties are in red and my subject property is in blue. Now, obviously, I can change this to where I can show other icons. I can change the size and the color, or I could import custom symbols. But the other thing that it's doing here is that when I imported this file, it does bring in all of the content. And so, for example, if I wanted to look at something else, I could do so. So I could click on one of these points and I could see under my attributes, you see that this is a comp, the address, the city, the state, the zip code. I also have a sales figure. But the other way that I can actually visualize this, instead of looking at this by unique symbols, if I scroll down, I can change for types and size. And so now what we're talking about is our subject property is blue and our comps are red. But then the color size or the size is going to be based on that sales attribute. So if I wanted my larger sales volumes to show up with the bigger circles, you could see how you could visualize that information. You could also save the layer if you wanted to use it again in the future, but just wanted you to be aware of that capability. And that's something that some people don't realize is there different ways that we can actually visualize the things that we are mapping. So that's the subject comp capability. Now, kind of along those same lines, I want to show you how you can bring in data linked to geography. And so again, I'm going to show you the Excel file. Next time we're going to look at sales by zip code. So this is a retailer that has some business and a number of different zip codes in the Evansville, Owensboro area. And you can see their sales volume. This is just manually imported information. But if I want to visualize that on the map, I can select Add Data and Import File and choose my sales by zip code. So when I import that, instead of selecting point locations, I don't have the point location data. I only have geographic boundaries in that spreadsheet. And so I'm going to select my geographical level, which in this case is going to be zip code. And here you can see the outlines of all of the zip codes that are represented in that spreadsheet. And it's going to ask me if I want to combine the selected geographies into a single site. No, I want to keep them separate. And I'm going to save this because in a moment, I'm going to be able to show on a color gradient scale where the sales are high versus low. So that a question just came in, is there a way to visualize which the best performing retailers are in the area? That's not going to be built in, but if you happen to have those sales volumes, you could obviously import those and show, sales volume by store. A great question. So now that these have imported, we have these different zip codes delineated on our map. I'm going to go into suitability analysis. So I've always had an issue with the name suitability analysis. I actually think really it's a weighted average scoring metric. Because what we're going to look at here is we can choose our variables. You can choose any of Esri's variables to visualize. So maybe you wanted to look at population or income or race and or ethnicity or tapestry segmentation. Well, in this case, I don't want to use any of that data. I'm actually interested in using my own data. So add attributes from the sites when I go into site criteria. And I want to look at the sales. So that data is coming directly from my spreadsheet. So you see that I have 22 different zip codes. And what we're looking at here is a situation where the smaller sales volumes are in the light yellow and our larger sales volumes are in our red. And so I can obviously change this. And maybe I want to filter these. I only want to show places where I'm getting over $15,000 in sales. And so now you can see that there's only 17 zip codes delineated here. Maybe I want to see where are all the ones over 20,000. Oh, it's going to be these zip codes. that meet our criteria. On the contrary, we can also come down here to the bottom and we can filter these results. So if I said, oh, I want to see where my top 5 zip codes are, or maybe my bottom 5 zip codes, you can see how we can visualize that data on the map. Every time we make any of the changes on the map, you're going to get the reflected data here down below. So the zip code, 0 being the poorest score and 1 being the highest score. So again, our top zip code in this case is going to be this 30,000 in sales. So that's how you can map in data. And I see people that'll map in data by county. Maybe you have some multifamily data that you want to bring in, maybe the number of units, or maybe total square footage for industrial submarkets, things like that. You can bring in that data by whatever standard geography that you want. Let's see. Is there a way to search retail categories? Yes, absolutely. And I did bring in that data from another spreadsheet. But for example, if I said, oh, I want to look at all restaurants, instead of doing a points of interest search where I'm just searching all businesses, I could go in and search by category, and I could search restaurants, and I could map that data. And maybe I only want to see the big national brands. I could filter that and say, okay, I want to look at Subway, McDonald's, Taco Bell, Wendy's, and Wing Street. And then maybe I would, instead of looking at all of these points the same, I could show unique symbols and uncluster them, and I could associate logos with them to give you an idea of kind of what that process would look like. Great question. All right, the next thing is something that I find that I am getting more and more questions about. And that's the idea of bringing in publicly available data. And so I'm going to go down to Houston, and I'm going to want to make sure that I zoom in on my map before I do this, because what we're bringing in is a very large set of data. And so I think a lot of people, even who have spent a lot of time in business analysts, don't realize the handshake that happens between ArcGIS Online, so Esri's mapping platform, and Business Analyst, which is really more of the analytics platform. And so if you go into Maps, Add Data, you'll see Web Maps and Layers. And here you'll see different content that's available. So a couple of things here. Living Atlas is going to be the authoritative data set from Esri. So for example, if you wanted to look at sea level rise projections from NOAA, or you wanted to look at weather pattern data, or you wanted to look at authoritative boundaries for zip codes or counties all around the world. That's going to be the Living Atlas. You can look at boundaries and people and infrastructure and environment. ArcGIS is the public domain. And so public data that might be provided by local or municipal GIS departments. So in this case, I'm going to look for parcels in Houston. And here you can see that there is a provided data set for parcels. And if I wanted to, I could view the detailed map. I could see where this is coming from under the ownership data, and I can add it to the map. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit further because, again, lots of parcels in this area in Western Houston. There we go. So you can see that the map is being created, a very intense map of parcel data. Now, if I wanted to click on one of these points, one of these boundaries, I could get all the details here. So the tax ID, the tax year, what is it? What are we looking at here? Under legal description, you can see that we got multifamily residential. This is condo land, appraised value, whatever the details that are coming from the Harris County Appraiser's Office are actually the data points that are available here. Well, one of the things that we can do here is if we go into our project, so this is the Advanced STDB webinar, when we add that layer to our map, it becomes ours and we can do whatever we want to with it. And so if we were to look at our parcels that we brought in here, and click on the ellipses out to the right side, you would see the option to filter by attributes. So the attributes are going to be any of the data points that are associated with these boundaries. And so if I say I want to select an attribute, maybe I'm interested in looking at something like, oh, I don't know, land use description. And maybe I'm only interested in viewing high-rise apartments. And so, hold on, I'm going to do this one more time. Not kind of a single family residential area. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. And I can filter by apartment high rise or by garden or by single family. And what's going to happen is you're going to get the number of attributes displayed on the map. So it's going to show the border and it's going to show you where those locations are. Now, I might have zoomed out just a little bit too far because now it looks like it is bogging down a little bit. That is something you do have to deal with because this is an online environment. Let's try this one more time. Zoom in just a little further. Thank you for your patience here. And I have an opportunity to filter these data points and be able to visualize them on the map, highlight all of them, compare them, create study areas from them because they are features on your map. And so it's just something that, like I said, a lot of people don't realize is available within the filtering capabilities. Here, try it one more time. If we said, oh, we want to look at, you know, apartment tax credit properties, we can visualize that data. Or if we wanted to look at a tax ID number, we can show where those different data points are on the map and see those parcel boundaries outlined. So again, how we got to that, we went to add data, web maps and layers. I turned on the parcels. Again, got to be patient with it because it's bringing in a large amount of data onto the map. And then we're going to go in and we're going to filter those parcels once we've done that. Okay. Let's see. Looks like there are. Yeah, could you filter by zoning category? Yes, if that is one of the attributes, you absolutely could. Yeah, great question. Yeah, any of the characteristics of that data set. So again, you go in, you click on the ellipses, and when you say filter by attributes, you can show the attribute table as well, so you can see all of the different attributes that are in there. But when I clicked on the actual points, you saw just how many, the year, the appraised value, all of that kind of stuff is going to show up on the map. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is building our own reports. And so some of our more advanced users who are in the system constantly, they might run into credit consumption issues. So for those of you who don't know, CCIM members receive 2,500 Esri service credits every year. That equates to 250 reports for most users. Our subscribers get 5,000 Esri service credits, so 500 reports. And then above that, you are subject to additional fees of about $1 per report. But I'm going to go ahead and just refresh Business Analyst because I've accidentally zoomed out just a little bit too far there. And that's what caused the Business Analyst to kind of slow down there. So if I go back into my maps, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a study area. So I'm going to define my areas, and I'm just going to do this based on a zip code. In this case, I'm going to look at 60611 in Chicago. And so once my study area is created, most people know that you can either run infographics or you can run reports. Well, one of the other options that you have is to go in and build your own reports. And so the reason that I see a lot of people creating their own custom reports is because instead of running 5 or 10 different reports, you can actually create a report that suits your needs. And instead of it maybe containing 20 pages. You might be able to simplify things in a way that's meaningful for you. So maybe you're doing senior living work and you want part of the age 50 plus profile. You can go down and you can actually choose sections of reports. And then maybe you also want some lifestyle data. So you might scroll down to the tapestry reports. Maybe you want to include the top 3 tapestries. So you could go in and you could highlight these different sections. Well, once you have created the report that you want to, you can save the template. So custom template for advanced webinar. And what happens when I save this template, now it becomes my own and I can run this just like I would run any other report. So for example, if I was to come in to run reports, instead of running an Esri report, I could just go into my reports and you see all the different custom templates. So custom template for advanced webinar, I can run now, and I'm going to get that for any study area that I create. So custom templates. And then I could download that report, and now I'm going to get, a couple of the different data sets that I want, including my tapestry data, as well as my age 50 plus profile. And it's still going to have all the interactive nature. So for example, if I clicked on Metro Renters, it's going to bring up that PDF and I'm going to be able to look at the who are we? What is our spending like? Do we own our homes? Do we rent our homes? Where do we live across the country? All of that kind of lifestyle data that's included. The other option you have for creating your own reports is opposed to these tabular style reports, what you can do is you can run your own infographics. So you can build infographics. Now, I remember when I heard about this, I thought, oh, this is going to involve so much training. It's going to be really difficult. I wasn't so sure about it. But let's say that we wanted to start with a template like the target market summary. I was shocked to find just how easy it was to recreate my own custom templates. So let's say I don't want this age pyramid. I want to replace this with something else. I can hover over the section of the report that I want to change, edit, or replace. And you can see here that I could bring in another infographic. I could add my own text. I can bring in imagery, a chart. Maybe I want to know what's nearby. Maybe this report is specifically for car washes. And I want to know all the car washes that are nearby. Well, I could go in and I could select under the automotive category. I could find all of the car washes and I could show that data as a table on my map. Now we would have the list of all of the car washes on that custom report. Maybe I want to go in and change my business logo. I can go in and I can replace this with a different template. Or I want to edit what we're looking at. I say, I want to edit that image and save my own business logo in here. And just like with the other system, all we need to do is save the template, give it a unique name, and it would be available to you. One last thing about infographics. So there's about 35 different custom templates that are available to the masses. There's also an entire system of gallery infographics that I highly recommend you taking a look at. These are authoritative data sets that really provide great templated reports. All of the old classic reports are in templated form. There's really nice looking templated reports that you can also work with. You can save as your own. And again, you can customize them to your liking. So that's the building reports and building infographics section. Next, I want to talk a little bit about mapping our own data once again. And in this case, I've got an Excel file. I had a client who was interested in purchasing a building in South Florida, and they had all of their potential purchases. And this was going to be an HVAC distribution center, and You can see that we have square footage and we have price details, but we also just have their location information. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to import that file and create study areas so they could better determine how much business there was likely to be in these different areas. And so what we did is we selected the study areas, created those study areas. You can see the different points, and we created 4-mile rings around those sites. And we saved it. So we're going to overwrite that existing layer because I had already uploaded this previously. And you see here that there's, 4 down in the kind of Miami proper, and 4 of these locations are up a little further to the north. And certainly all still in the same general area. But what's so amazing is just how different these neighborhoods are when it comes to spending patterns and lifestyle patterns, and the needs and wants of the individual communities, and the financial means to do so. And so one of the things that we were able to do here is we were able to look at a side-by-side comparison on the total spend for air conditioning and contractors and systems. We could look at that data. We could also look at the total businesses. And so the first thing I'm going to do here is I've got these 8 different study areas. I'm actually going to highlight all of them. So again, the select key up in the top right-hand corner. And I'm going to create a site for the combined areas. And so we get this custom trade area for HVAC. They knew that they were going to go into one of these 8 different locations, but when we were able to do this, we could overlay the businesses within that area. So kind of like we were doing with co-tenancy earlier, we only want to look within these study areas. So my sites, my custom trade area. And what we were looking for, we can go into category. And again, we were looking at air conditioning, and they wanted to know how many businesses, air conditioning, contractors, and systems were in these areas. And so you can see there's 322 competitors. Well, not necessarily competitors, because this is actually a supply house and distribution center, but these are going to be all of the businesses here. Now you can see that there's a big cluster of them down here to the south. And we were looking at this information. We thought, well, we don't really want to look at it with these clustering. So the first thing we did is we changed our symbols to where we were not clustering. You can see all those different points. And I thought that that was kind of an interesting way of looking at it. But then I thought, oh, what if we styled this just a little bit differently? What if we created a heat map? And what if we changed the way that we actually viewed our heat map? And maybe our area of influence was a little bit smaller. We could really get a feel for where those businesses concentrate. I could change the different styling options, to my liking. If I said, oh, I want to change the transparency, I want to make the area of influence a little smaller, you could see where the high versus the low is. Or maybe we want the full spectrum. You can kind of see where those concentrations of those businesses are. So the other option that we had here is if we were looking at those different 4-mile rings, we could create a comparison report. And so over here in the Run Analysis tab, what you'll find is the option for the benchmark comparisons. And so if I wanted to compare each of those 4 or each of the 8 different 4-mile rings, I could start with the features on the map. And I don't want to use my custom trade area because there's some overlap there. I just want to select the 8 different 4-mile rings. And next what we'll see is we have the option to look at any variable on a side-by-side comparison. And so if I was to go into browse all variables, and I think so many people think about the standard demographic variables that are available, but there's even demographic variables such as 2024 heat and AC electrical work spend. and I can see exactly the amount of expected spend within that area. So heat and air conditioning, electrical work spent by the owner. If I do that search, we can see that in these different 4 mile rings, ranges of spend go all the way from 28 million all the way to 45 million. And I really like this little templated table here at the bottom, but what I also like is if you wanted to visualize the data on the map, I find that this is so helpful. We can actually go in and we can show high to low, and we can choose that variable. So 2024 heat and air conditioning, electrical work, and you can see where the highest spend is. You can also see that data ranked, and you can export it to Excel to even include things like the mean, the median, standard deviation even. You can export that data, and they've done a lot of work on just what kind of export is available. So here you can see the standard data, but you can also see the high to low, the top and bottom, above and below the benchmark, the quantile data, the highlights extremes. So just really good information that you can get out of that benchmark layer. A question that just came through, um, when will we be seeing the 2025 data? That data is typically available the last week of June. Um, and so you'll see all 2025 data with 2030 projections. One of the other things that I really like that Esri's done, and they're going to continue to do so going forward, up in the top right-hand corner under the data source, here you see the option to choose your different countries. Well, in this case, we're interested in the USA. And if we were to click on this drop down, you'll notice that we have 2023 data and we also have 2024 data. Well, we'll also be able to, in just a couple of months, look at the 2025 data. And so you can toggle between the different data points over the course of time to see how things have changed. I also really like one of the reports that's available. For those of you who have not run the report before, I'm just going to choose a study area to run it because I think this is a really nice report. So if we were looking at our custom trade area for our HVAC, under classic reports, you're going to see a report by the name of the time series profile. And the time series profile shows us year by year changes on just a couple of very relevant data points. So population, households, and housing units. But the ability to look at all of those year by year. So again, population, households, and housing units from 2010 all the way to current 2024 data points. And then so if we wanted to see, okay, how are things changing in this area? Well, we've heard a lot about the changes in South Florida. You know, where are these big changes occurring from a population standpoint? And then how is the housing units and the housing market adjusting? Um, is it in parallel or are they starting to diverge? And you can kind of see that kind of information. All right. So the next thing I want to show is a data set that I got out of Moody's. And this is the multifamily property list. And so there's a lot of information here. Well, what we had done is we'd done a search in Moody's, CRE Pro. Um, and what we had gotten is this list of properties that are available for sale in the multifamily market in North Texas. You'll see that I've filtered the list to include building size, total unit count, the year built, average rent, and there's some ownership information and things like that. But what we want to do is we want to use some of this data to create a suitability analysis and be able to visualize that data because we had a client that was looking for the most total units that they could get their hands on. They were looking for an area in high growth. They actually wanted the average rent to be lower because they were going to do some pretty significant rehabilitation on the property. Or that was the plan. But they were also looking for the newer was better. And so we had all of those data points in the spreadsheet. But what we wanted to do is bring that information into our map. So again, kind of what we've continued to do is import these data points. We have those point locations in this case. We have address, city, state, and zip code. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to create study areas from each of them. Specifically, they wanted to create a pretty small study area. It was a 5-minute drive time. And you see there's going to be a lot of overlay for these 44 different sites. Because again, these are all in the North Dallas, Plano, um, Allen, McKinney submarket. And so what it's doing is it's taking all the information from that Excel spreadsheet and it's loading it into the points so that we can look at those attributes, but it's also creating those 5-minute drive times as a single layer. Now you can see that it's saving the layer and we have our 44 different sites. What we want to do is create that suitability analysis. We want to use all 44 of the different properties for comparison, so we're going to select next. And I'm going to start selecting criteria. Now, I mentioned that they wanted to look at population growth. So if I go into add variables from my data browser, I can look at population growth. And so this is going to show us our 2024 to 2029 compounded annual population growth. And I'm going to go ahead and click apply. And so right now we're seeing where is that population growing the fastest? And you can see here that out here to the east, we're seeing a population growth of almost 5%. And then you can see their full range, but that wasn't the only thing that they were interested in. They also wanted to look at the number of units, the year built, and the average rent. So they were actually looking at 4 different things simultaneously. And the way that the system sets this up, I have it set up to where we have automatic influence is positive. Well, in this case, population growth is positive. Number of units is also positive. Year built, the higher, the better. So again, positive. But average rent, lower is better. So I'm going to select inverse. And notice when I change from positive to inverse, just how much the map changes. Because you can see when we're talking about an inverse relationship, we now have this site in Princeton is going to be our top scoring point. Now, what if we also decided that we wanted to filter these a little bit more? Maybe on unit count, we knew that we weren't going to be interested in the site if it had fewer than 100 units. You can filter these however you want to get the results that you're looking for. So you can adjust the weights. So if I said, oh, you know what? I think the average rent, that's more important. That's 50% of the equation. And the growth rate is only 10%. And so you can adjust these different variables based on your client or your investment needs. It's something that I think is one of the best things that Esri has done, the suitability analysis. I think it has great capabilities. And if you can just get to know how to use it by adding the data and then using Esri's data in conjunction with your own data, I think it can be a really, really useful tool. All right. So that was 7 different exercises. We started out with our shopping center at Sprouts and talked a little bit about co-tenancy. We talked about filtering parcels. We did a subject comp map. We mapped our sales by zip code. We built infographics and reports. We mapped sites in southern Florida and we created a comparative analysis from that. We also combined all those study areas to find out where the contractors and systems professionals were. And then we also uploaded our own multifamily property data that we'd gotten out of Moody's. So I know that that's kind of a whirlwind, but that was kind of the hope with the advanced session is that we could really touch on a lot of different content. There's one last thing that I wanted to show, and it's a new AI capability that's built into the business analyst. And if you go up into the top right-hand corner, you'll see it. It's the business analyst assistant. It's still in beta, but we do believe that we're going to see some pretty significant improvement here. What I like about this is it allows users to create maps and run reports and search points of interest relatively quickly without the click-by-click, step-by-step knowledge that's required to use the site currently. So for example, if I say I want to map coffee shops in Portland, Oregon, what you can see here is that it knows that I'm looking for points of interest search. It's created the DMA of Portland, and maybe I want to go in and change this. Maybe I only want the city limits. And if I say add POIs, we'll automatically see all of those different points on the map. And maybe I only want to see the Starbucks and the Dutch Brothers and the Stumptown coffee roasters. You can see that I can adjust these things with just a couple clicks of a button. And I really like where they're headed on this business analyst assistant, because I think, we realize that not all real estate professionals are GIS professionals. And so the more that we can do to make these tools easy for you to use, the better. So again, that's the way that you access this is up in the top right-hand corner in the Business Analyst Assistant. It's those three little stars. All right, I am going to answer some additional questions, but I am going to go ahead and stop the recording. So hold on for just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.